by kind of definition, authority reverts back to the center. It requires a different type of leadership style, when a bit more kind of authoritative, where you say, well, actually, yes, sorry, you will, these are the COVID protocols, you will obey them, you will wear a mask, you will wash your hands, you will teach your lessons in this learning zone. And that sort of goes against the kind of grain in terms of, I guess, as leaders, what we really want.
Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator, specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. So I am delighted this week that I'm joined by Andrew Gordon-Brown, who is the head of Kingswood School in Bath. And Andrew and I had a conversation which was really wide-ranging around all sorts of topics covering strategic thinking in schools and how to develop a really robust strategy for your school. So back in 2003, Andrew switched from a career in banking and finance into teaching. So he became a teacher at Radley College and taught economics and also coached rowing and rugby. And that followed on from his keen sportsman career before that, where he represented South Africa in the 1992 Olympic Games for rowing and also Oxford University in the 1994 boat race. In 2007, he moved up to Lancashire and took the post of Deputy Headmaster at Stonyhurst College. And then in 2013, Andrew was appointed Headmaster of Truro School in Cornwall. So he joined Kingswood School in September 2020 and has been working on developing a strategy for the school, and I've been helping him with that. And in our conversation, we talk about all sorts of things, from the importance of distributed leadership rather than a more hierarchical leadership system, which we often see historically within independent schools. The importance of being strategic when you're setting up partnerships, being really focused when you're allocating limited resources, and how all of this ties into strategy and strategic thinking. So we cover a whole range of topics which will be really useful for senior leaders across the independent school system. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/ebook. So let's dive into my conversation with Andrew Gordon-Brown. So welcome, Andrew. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast.
Juliet, thank you very much. It is, as ever, nice to be with you.
Absolutely. So you and I have been working together on various elements of school strategy on and off for the last few years. And I think I'd be right in saying that we are on the same page in our belief that being strategic is important within schools. Have I gauged that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we first met all those years ago, where you were doing your research into strategic planning in independent schools, I think, if you like, when I was part of your research sample.
That's right, yes.
We definitely, I definitely felt we were on the same page, which is why I got you back as soon as I could to come and work with various of our staff members at my first headship at Truro and now my second headship at Kingswood, because I feel really passionately about developing strategic thinking skills across the organisation.
Yeah, and what was interesting from the results of that research was that it wasn't that it is important the way that independent schools develop their strategic plan, but that actually what is as important, or potentially even more important, is embedding some of that culture of strategic thinking in the school, so that it's not just seen that strategy is something that happens once every 5 years with senior leadership and governors, but it's actually something that's lived every day. And I think that's been a pattern, hasn't it, to the work that we've done together, is embedding that more deeply.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I forget which management guru it was who said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and
Yes.
I know you believe that, and
Yeah.
I think I certainly do that. But if the school culture involves staff members feeling empowered, having had a chance to develop their strategic thinking skills, then effectively that can become part of the culture, and that's certainly the vision that we're trying to kind of unpack and develop here at Kingswood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that culture can spread across all sorts of different elements beyond just strategic thinking. But I think that word empowered that you just used is really important, that actually if people understand how their day-to-day work and the decisions that they make, they may feel that they're quite small-scale decisions, but if they can understand that actually those decisions are really important in helping a school to take a coherent strategic direction forward. So everything from, if your strategy includes embedding pupil voice, for example, that's the job of every single person across the school. And it is really important to empower staff to feel that they are helping to guide the ship, if you like, helping to move the school in one consistent direction together.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, Juliet, one of the things you realise about schools is there is a risk, and maybe this is something that's come down uh, over the centuries, particularly in the sort of UK independent sector. But there's a risk that schools are kind of excessively hierarchical.
Yeah.
Where you've got this kind of one great leader at the top, the headmaster or the principal or the headmistress, and for me, that's certainly not the kind of model that I subscribe to. And if I think back to my first headship, one of the observations that I had towards the end, as I was about to leave and come to Kingswood, was that there was a whole lot of great stuff going on at school, and I didn't even know about it. And it kind of made me smile because I guess when I inherited my first headship, there was very much a kind of let's ask the head, or let's ask the bursar, or let's ask the kind of senior managers if we can do this. And I think over the 8 years that I was there, managing to kind of shift that culture where we had a clear vision and a strong culture, and staff just kind of got on with it. And I would find out after the event often that brilliant things were going on, and that made me kind of smile and actually rather happier, I guess, as a kind of job well done, because I think if you can preside over a school where people feel a kind of sense of autonomy over their work and a sense of agency that they can get on and move the school forward in their area, I think you've got a really healthy school.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? This is part of a wider trend in leadership and the study of leadership. So a lot of that kind of historical way of thinking about you had to have a really charismatic leader at the top, and that was what really mattered. That's quite an outdated view now. There's much more emphasis now in looking at effective organizations. It's shown that actually it's to do with distributed leadership, to do with authentic leadership. And actually it's not about just one figurehead presenting the solutions to all the problems that an organisation faces. And I think we're seeing that within the independent school sector. It's mirroring the pattern across other organisational sectors, in moving more to that sense of empowering your people, encouraging people to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, because they're just getting on with things, being innovative, being creative. And that's all reliant, though, on them knowing the boundaries, if you like, the direction that the organisation wants to take, so the school's kind of strategic direction, what is possible, what isn't possible, based around the values that a school has and embedding those. And if you've got all that in place, it really can free up people across the school to be much more empowered and taking that distributed leadership to the next level, the next step.
Yeah, actually, Julia, one of the slides that I really kind of resonated with me that you showed when you did some training at Kingswood is if you've got talented staff who feel empowered to move their department forward in whatever way they like, but if that isn't aligned to the kind of strategic vision and a kind of overall sense of direction for the organization, you end up with people doing what they might think is great things, but pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
So I think the point you're making there, which is right, is and perhaps that is one of the most important roles of the head, is to do the work with other stakeholders to agree on an ambitious vision for the school, and to agree the kind of the values that are important to your organization, which then, if lived out, become the culture. But so if you get that piece right at the top, then when you talk about people who are empowered and have agency over their work, what they're doing is moving the school in a way, in a forward direction, but in a way that's consistent with the vision of the school. And so I think that's why taking the time up front to say, look, where are we going, and are we all on board is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, so it's a set of 2 slides that I show in a lot of my training sessions, and it's so simple, but it really has an impact. People remember it for years afterwards. So the first slide has a set of arrows pointing in all directions, and so each member of staff is making decisions heading all over the place. And there's this sense that if you move an inch in every direction, you end up exactly where you started again. And then the second slide shows a set of arrows all pointing roughly in the same direction. Not exactly, we're all human. Each individual will make a slightly different decision and interpretation of your strategic direction. But basically all those arrows are heading in the same direction because you've got a consistent idea of that strategic direction that you're taking as a school, the values that underpin that, the things that are important, what you're going to focus your limited resources on, and what you're going to not do, which is just as important as what you are going to do.
Yeah, that's the point you make there about limited resources. That's I suppose a kind of key thing in all in the minds of all heads, is that schools can't do everything.
Yeah. So
choices have to be made. It's almost, I guess, it must be true without exception. If you look at schools wherever they exist across the UK, they're going to be probably quite a significant player in their local area, in their local markets, in terms of being I guess quite simply, often they're big employers of people who work and live in the local area, and they have profile, and obviously people feel passionately about education. So one of the things that I realized is that there are always organizations, other high quality organizations, actually not necessarily schools, but other organizations that will want to work with you as a school in your area. And so if you can come up with a partnership idea or a joint venture idea where there's another organization that does something brilliantly that kind of consistent with your own strategic direction, then by partnering, you're in a sense bringing additional resource into your school in pursuit of your strategic aims. And so I'm quite a big fan of looking out, and it's quite easy for schools to become kind of quite insular and kind of silos because it's a busy old demanding job.
Yeah.
And I think one of the roles of the head is very much to be looking out about who do I want to partner with in my local area to help further our kind of strategic plan.
Absolutely, and to do that in a really innovative, creative way, not just thinking about, okay, so who are the education players in my local environment, but thinking much more widely than that, and thinking about which organisations have that underpinning of the same values that you have, the same kind of vision of what the future world will look like because of the existence of your organisations. When you share that and you're both excelling in your respective fields, there are all sorts of opportunities. I think at Truro you had a fantastic partnership with a cookery school, obviously being Cornwall and the sort of foodie emphasis down there. That seemed to be a really successful partnership.
Yeah, that is a good example. And I think one of the things I realized was that the lack of a facility to teach young people to cook, just as an essential life skill, was one of the big kind of holes in our curriculum. And so I guess the strategic piece there was, well, you could set up what you might call a kind of teaching kitchen, where you get groups of kids in and you can achieve that. Well, I guess we took a much more kind of ambitious strategy and said, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Let's kind of capture that zeitgeist in Cornwall at the time about food and cooking and local produce. And so we set up a cookery school, which effectively, both as another department in the curriculum, but actually also as a commercial venture. And we did it in partnership with Leiths. So, and that's proved really successful because there are students who, in the sixth form, who can take on the Leiths diploma alongside their A-levels. And that adds a fabulous kind of enrichment opportunity for them who want to take that really seriously. But equally, if you're just interested in learning to cook your top 10 meals on a budget when you're at university, I think really important that you have those skills when you leave.
Yeah.
So that was quite a good example of being a little bit more kind of ambitious, I suppose, with the vision, and ending up with something that was both an enhancement to the school curriculum, but also an enhancement to the school brand through a kind of a commercial product as well.
Yeah, and I think what's really powerful about that and the really successful partnerships that you see is that it's using strategy stacking. So the idea that the school might have a whole variety of areas that it's trying to strengthen, either because it's things that are already going well and you're trying to build a reputation around those areas, or challenges that you might face as a school. And when you can come up with a project like that or an idea or partnership that actually addresses multiple challenges. So that could be to do with the curriculum and embedding, as you said, teaching children about health and food and being independent. There's an element there about how it contributes to your sixth form offering, in particular with regards to preparation for university. There's a sense of how it contributes to your local community partnerships and embedding yourself in that sense of a Cornwall community and a Cornwall ethos. It ticks off multiple parts of a strategy. And so I think one of the things that I work with schools on is always, if someone comes up with a good idea, that's great, but it needs to address multiple parts of your strategy if it's going to take significant resource of time or energy or money. And so finding the ways that you can leverage those projects to actually impact on multiple parts of your strategies is the really good trick.
Yeah, I agree with that, Juliet. And one of the other slides that I kind of often refer to that you introduced us to is really, well, I suppose it's the approach that you developed to the different dimensions of strategic thinking in schools. And I think because schools, in a sense that they're set up where there's a risk of silos. You've got individual academic departments and individual support service departments in the school supporting and kind of oiling the wheels of the organization. It's quite easy for the people who work in those departments to kind of think in silos. But oftentimes when someone in a department's got a good idea, once they're happy that the idea is kind of rooted in the vision of the school, if they start to look around the organization and say, well, who else is interested in my idea? Who might benefit, both within the school and externally? As you say, you end up with a much more powerful solution because it, as you said, it ticks off multiple components of things that are important to the school. Yeah. And then I suppose that cookery school was probably quite a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the model you referenced there, the framework, is strategic thinking in 3 dimensions. I'll put a link in the episode notes to the podcast episode I did about that. And one of the 3 dimensions is all about looking around you and about collaboration. And that's really important in schools, because you do tend to get silos, as you do in many organisations. But that silo thinking of, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing if it's benefiting me and my team, my department. But actually, by looking around, looking for opportunities to collaborate, you're doing exactly that piece of strategic thinking, which is creating the systems thinking that you need around some of this strategy. So you're looking for opportunities to collaborate, to leverage your work, to work in a much bigger, wider cross-departmental team. And it's all about focusing your efforts on a small number of projects, but the ones that are going to really have an impact, because they stack different strategies together, they impact on multiple challenges that you face, and can actually benefit multiple teams across the school as well. Really
Yeah, I
effective.
mean, I think probably that as a kind of leader, that was maybe one of the things that I had to guard against as the head. I probably annoyed my staff at times by just coming up with one too many ideas and then saying, "Just headmaster, please stop. And can we just focus on the small number of strategic objectives that we really think are important?" And I think that's a kind of good leadership lesson to learn as well. Is about prioritizing where you're going to focus your efforts.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can sort of run your school ragged and end up not doing anything particularly well. So I think it's important to kind of, if you think about developing a strategic plan, it's look, what are the 2 or 3 key areas where you want to kind of drive change to overcome, a kind of sticking point or something that's standing in the way of your vision. But choose a small number because you've got much better chance of delivering on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that is a challenge within, I'm sure it's other organisations too, but schools, they're really busy places. Just running the day-to-day elements of the school is massively resource intensive, especially at certain times of year. People are just thinking, oh my goodness, I can only just get through my standard workload at this time of year. And to then layer on top of that a host of strategic projects you can overwhelm people sometimes. And I think you're absolutely right, Andrew, that there is a tendency for idea generation to happen beyond where it's actually helpful. And what's really beneficial is when you can pull it back to the small number of projects that you're really going to focus on. But that idea generation has to happen in advance of that to ensure you've got the right couple of projects on your priority list. Because otherwise, if you just pick the couple that come straight to mind and then pursue those, then it's not necessarily the strongest idea that you could have gone ahead with. So there's that divergent thinking and then convergent thinking stage. And the divergent thinking is when you can have all those brilliant ideas and get ideas from all your stakeholders about how you can solve the problems that you're trying to address, or how you can really embed the things that are going really well. And then once you've made those decisions in the convergent thinking stage of what you're going to prioritize, keep you on track is the key, I think, there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things you did. Why I kind of like your kind of 4 pillars approach to developing a strategic plan, because I think that everyone agrees on you've got to get the vision and values piece right, and often at schools that's just a kind of reaffirmation of stuff that everyone knows.
Yeah.
But then taking the time to do that, if you like, for want of a better term, the kind of SWOT analysis, where I know you call them, looking at your accelerators. What are the strengths you really want to build on, but also the sticking points? What are the things that stand in your way, which you might be called threats or weaknesses?
Yeah.
And I think if you've got a really clear handle on those, then that definitely helps you to say, okay, let's pick off the 2 or 3 things that we think really stand in the way of us achieving the vision, and kind of go after those.
Yeah.
And equally, let's if 90% of our strategy is just to say, well, look, let's just look for marginal gains in the stuff that we already know we do well, and just keep that moving forward. So I think, but going, as you say, going through that process helps you to filter and prioritize in a way that, as you say, when you get to that convergent thinking and start to talk about, okay, what specific actions are we going to do? You've kind of done the thinking beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes teams or schools feel that they're just rehashing old conversations. But what I often find when I'm leading that section of the kind of strategy away days and so on that I lead is a lot of people have their own point of view of what's going well and what could be improved, but actually they haven't always taken the time to share that point of view because life's so busy that you just have this set of assumptions that you live by in your head about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses as a school. And it can be really enlightening actually to share those with your colleagues and across senior leadership, across governors, across staff, through staff surveys, staff kind of town hall meetings and so on, and getting a sense of where everyone else thinks your accelerators and sticking points are. And then that gives you a sense of consensus so that when you are looking for those, as you say, the marginal gains on the things that are already going well that you just need to really keep just tweaking and changing to really excel at, and those couple of things that you need to take some concerted action to really overcome some kind of challenge that you face. But it's actually having that joint conversation that can be really powerful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I obviously took over the headship at Kingswood in the midst of a pandemic. So, it's probably fair to say that this year didn't go according to the vision that I originally had at the start, thinking, well, this is what I'll do in my first year of headship, but it's probably not what I've done. But actually, I think one of the things that I did, which has been really useful, is in the process of kind of looking and listening and finding out. I used SurveyMonkey to just craft a few simple questions, which I put to all of the staff across the foundation, and then kind of repackaged that and put almost the same questions to our parent body. And that was it was quite affirming actually, because it gave a strong sense that the culture that we think we have is actually the culture that parents and staff feel every day on the ground. And also the things that we think we need to be better at. There are common messages coming back from that parental survey, which are quite powerful. Yeah. And so it's really quite comforting to know that the things that might emerge as priorities for strategic development in our own minds, the parents are thinking along those lines as well.
Yeah, and that involvement in strategy is really important. Strategy isn't a game to play on your own sitting in a room. It's all about involving the stakeholders. And I think many senior leaders across independent schools have felt the same this year. It's frustrating not to just be able to be there at pick up and drop off and just chat to the parents and get a sense of what their thoughts are. So the online surveys and things are a really good way of collecting this information. I think when we're able to getting back to some of that face-to-face informal conversation is also a really useful way of just taking the temperature, if you like, of the culture, the approach, the way people are thinking, and inviting people to be honest in the comments that they give back and the feedback that they give. Really important. I think as well with the pandemic, one of my senses is that strategy is still as important as it ever has been. And as the competitive marketplace becomes more challenging, potentially, depending on independent schools' local competitive marketplace, as well as the international boarding marketplace, there's a sense that actually strategy needs to be more agile. You can still set a strategic direction, and a 5-year strategic plan is still appropriate, but there's a sense that there needs to be this constant scanning of the environment and checking of that strategy, and that is a process that's best done by people who are actually at the coalface, the people who are actually interacting with our core stakeholders, the parents, the pupils, the prospective parents. And actually that requires a bit more of a strategic approach from all staff, and that agility within the culture of strategic thinking is increasingly important because of the pace of change during the pandemic. Is that a view you share, Andrew, or do you have a different point of view on that?
I mean, I think I do share that. I think one of the kind of fundamental beliefs I have, I suppose, as regards leadership is this concept of leadership at every level.
Yeah.
I think what's happened in the pandemic, and when any organisation is in a crisis, and I guess you could call the pandemic a crisis, is that almost by kind of definition, authority reverts back to the centre. It requires a different type of leadership style when a bit more kind of I don't know what the right word is, but it was sort of authoritative, where you're saying, well, actually, yes, sorry, you will. These are the COVID protocols. You will obey them. You will wear a mask. Mm-hmm. You will wash your hands. Yeah. You will teach your lessons in this learning zone. And that sort of goes against the kind of grain in terms of, I guess, as leaders, what we really want. I think one of the challenges post-pandemic will be to say, well, that was then, but right now we want to get back to that idea of leadership at every level, where you know that agency in your area is important. And I think going back, Juliet, to your question around the importance of strategic thinking in a pandemic. I mean, I think one of the ways that the independent sector did set itself apart was in saying, okay, we're in lockdown. We've got fee-paying parents with children at home who we need to work out how we can deliver value to them. So what do we know about remote teaching? Well, back in March 2020, the answer was not very much. And we were lucky that we had the kind of Easter holidays to figure it out after the 23rd of March, etched in my memory. But I think schools responded very quickly, and the kind of agility between that date and now, if you ask schools about, so tell me about your digital strategy, where is it now relative to where you were headed 18 months ago? There's absolutely been an acceleration.
Yes. And
schools have had to try and set themselves apart in the way that they use and employ technology just to support their aims. And certainly at Kingswood, we really accelerated our spend on all sorts of tech infrastructure to make sure that we were able to deliver a good product to our kids at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting you used the word kind of accelerated, that some of these changes, a lot of the changes that we've seen, okay, except for the specific requirement over masks and health related changes that we've seen, but a lot of the trends that we'd seen pre-pandemic have just been accelerating a lot faster. And it's interesting now, I think, to try and assess which of those might unravel, and step back in terms of the trends that might shift back to a little bit more like they were before, to do with the ways of working, requirements for wraparound care by parents, etc., etc. But I think there's also a sense that this has changed things forever. We're not going back to some kind of old normal. We're going back forward, constantly forward. And so technology, I think, has had a massive step change that it isn't going to step back.
I think that's one of the big areas of strategic change that will is going to outlast the pandemic.
Yeah,
I think I agree with that observation. But the other thing I think, though, is that from a UK perspective, before the last general election, there was much kind of Armageddon scenario where independent schools were going to be abolished, and there was going to be VAT on school fees, and all of those kind of exogenous threats. And I don't think those have gone away, but I also don't think that I think they're much more on the back burner. I don't think that from a kind of political perspective, there's not much appetite to be friends with the independent sector, but equally, I don't think there's much appetite to kind of bash us.
Yeah.
Because I think the independent sector probably came out of the pandemic with a kind of enhanced reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess from that point of view, whilst it's important to kind of look ahead and try and plan for some of those threats coming down the track over which you have no control, I think probably independent schools are probably not being complacent, but sitting a little easier about whether they're, how imminent those are.
I I think you're right, absolutely. And I think as well that the way to overcome many of those exogenous threats that we don't have a lot of control over within the sector has always been to do with partnerships with state schools, partnership teaching programs, bursaries, that sense of how does the sector positively contribute to society in a whole host of different ways. And so I think hopefully that schools have been reasserting their commitment to those areas because of the social situation in which COVID has placed us, with the inequalities in society becoming much more apparent. I think there is a general appetite that, yes, bursaries do need to be kind of front and centre of fundraising and so on and so forth. And I think that all of that work is really important for positioning and helping to communicate the independent school sector as actually having a role to play, a positive role to play in society, which it's quite frankly, it's overdue. You know, we need to do this work to place the independent schools in a positive light. And that if that work can continue, even when the pressure is off a little bit, when the pressure comes back, as it inevitably will, this sort of is a cyclical thing, the sector will be better placed to present a positive case for what we're doing to help society.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think in my experience, the facts of the matter are that every independent school kind of has a kind of genuine cast iron commitment to being a kind of generous player in its local area.
Yeah.
And it's not just kind of window dressing to keep the Charities Commission happy. I think it's part of most schools' kind of ethos about producing young men and women who believe it's their responsibility to serve others. And you know, each school to their own, but we're all finding ways to do that and to kind of engage with our local community for mutual benefit, not in some sort of kind of paternalistic way.
Yeah.
You know, we've got some ideas for you. And we are, you know, in a sense, we are in a position of privilege because the kind of per capita budgets that we get to work with in terms of delivering an educational product, for want of a better expression, we're much luckier than our state sector counterparts who are often, you know, operating with real kind of budget constraints. So, you know, and I think we get that privilege, but I also think that the understanding out there in the market, you know, for example, we have quite regular meetings with all the head teachers of the secondary schools in Bath, independent and state. And there's a real kind of appetite of kind of collegiality, working together. What are the things that we can do for the benefit of our pupils together? And so I'm quite excited about where that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is mutually beneficial. There are huge benefits on both sides to these partnerships. And I think it's, to be honest, it's the reason I'm still working in the sector. I think the senior leaders that I've met, the chairs of governors, the heads, the senior representatives of schools I've met all the way through my time working in this sector have always been so positive when I've talked about social justice, overcoming inequality, the role that independent schools have to play in society. The tricky bit is making sure it works alongside a business model that works. And that's where I can kind of help schools to find that middle ground. But I think that the time for words is over, and I'm really pleased to see that the actions that are now happening with the independent schools sector is stepping up to that rhetoric, which I think is really important during this time of challenge.
That's a good summary.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to wrap us up a little bit, Andrew, with one final question. So obviously we've all had a pretty challenging and unexpected year with COVID. It's over a year now. I'd be interested to know your outlook for the independent school sector. Are there challenges that you see ahead? Are there things that you're really excited about? What is your kind of sense about the sector coming forwards?
Well, that's a good question. I'm excited. I'm optimistic. You know, I grew up in South Africa. I'm kind of a state school educated boy. Grew up during the apartheid, so I personally think that the independent sector does a fabulous job. You know, I could obviously speak for my own school, but I know a lot of heads of a lot of other outstanding schools actually, and so I think there's a reason why it's such a popular export that people from around the world want to come and have a British education, because I think we kind of, we genuinely believe in an holistic approach to education. And yes, it costs money, and there are challenges to overcome that there, as you've mentioned. But I'm optimistic for the sector simply because I think the aspects of the education we offer are really valuable in the formation of young people. So I'm a big kind of believer in independent education, even though I didn't have the opportunity myself. But I certainly know I would have loved it if I had.
Yeah. I'm state school educated too, and I think it's that sense of knowing what can be that can really drive us still in this sector. And when you see what the excellent education that the independent schools are providing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time today. We've covered a lot of different variety of different topics. There are a couple of other podcast episodes that link to the conversation that we've had around strategic thinking in 3 dimensions, the 4 building blocks of strategy that Andrew mentioned earlier. So I'll add links to those episodes, to other podcast episodes in the episode notes, so you can look at those and explore those if you would like to. Thank you so much for your time today, Andrew. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about strategic thinking in schools.
Juliet, that is a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you next month when you're coming back to lead a governance strategy away day.
And thankfully in person.
Looking forward to seeing you.
I love being doing things in person. Great to see you. Bye, Andrew.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.